Did you know that the most expensive commodity at the end of the 19th century was not railways or gold mines, but human beings? In an era commonly referred to as Gilded, behind the glittering facades of mansions lurked deals that would make your blood run cold. We are used to seeing beautiful balls and romantic encounters in gardens in historical films, but the reality was infinitely far from this glossy picture. Behind closed bedroom doors, dramas unfolded that were not to be spoken of aloud, and tears were absorbed into antique tapestries. This is a story of how deep female misery and loneliness were hidden behind the outward glamour. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how one signature on a marriage contract could forever deprive a woman of the right to her own destiny and even her own thoughts. What if I told you that everything you believed when looking at old portraits is not true? We are used to thinking that the ball season was a time of fun, flirting, and carefree youth, but in reality, it was a harsh marketplace. Girls were prepared for debutante balls like soldiers are prepared for a decisive battle, where any mistake could cost them their lives. Mothers who had often gone through the mill themselves drilled their daughters, forcing them to spend hours learning how to curtsy and smile. Every detail of their attire, every wave of their fan and turn of their head was carefully rehearsed to make the right impression on potential buyers. The ballrooms, lit by thousands of candles, were filled not with romance but with a cold calculation that could be physically felt. Young girls stood along the walls like expensive goods in a shop window, waiting for the owner of the right title to notice them. Their hearts were not beating with love, but with fear of making a wrong move and disgracing the family that had invested a fortune in this evening. The men strolling among them with appraising glances were not looking for a soulmate, but a way to pay off the huge debts of their estates. The father's wealth was the bride's main asset, and it was the size of the dowry that was whispered about in the corridors while the orchestra played the waltz. The girls themselves understood their role in this game perfectly well, feeling like beautiful dolls in the hands of strangers. They were taught that their only goal was to marry well and raise their family's social status at any cost. There was no mention of feelings, affection, or even less so, love in these conversations. Dresses that weighed kilograms and cinched their waists so tightly that they could hardly breathe wore their uniform, hiding their trembling and insecurity. Beneath layers of silk and velvet, hearts beat with hope, only to be shattered time and again by the harsh reality of the market. They smiled when they wanted to cry and danced when their legs buckled from fatigue and tension. Competition between the heiresses was fierce, and friends instantly turned into rivals, ready to do anything for the attention of a duke or earl. Envious glances and poisonous whispers accompanied every success, reminding them that there was no place for sincere friendship in this world. The victory of one meant defeat for the others, and this created an atmosphere of constant tension. The newspapers of the time fueled the excitement by publishing lists of the most desirable brides and their supposed dowries, as if they were stock market reports. Society eagerly followed who would get whom, discussing future unions as if they were corporate mergers. The heroines of these rumors felt exposed to public scrutiny, deprived of their right to privacy. The pressure from parents was enormous, as their daughter's failure was perceived as the collapse of all the family's ambitions. Fathers, accustomed to managing business empires, applied the same methods to shaping their children's destinies. Mothers, whose own significance depended on their daughter's success, were ruthless in their criticism and demands. For many girls, this endless marathon of balls and receptions turned into torture that lasted for months. They dreamed of peace and quiet, but were obliged to shine and charm, hiding their true nature. Their personalities were erased, giving way to an ideal image created to satisfy the demands of high society. And when the proposal of marriage finally came, it was perceived not as the beginning of a fairy tale, but as the completion of a successful transaction. The ring on her finger was not a symbol of love, but a sign that the goods had been sold and the deal had been made. I'm very interested to hear your point of view. What do you think about parents effectively trading their daughter's happiness for status? Write about it in the comments. Guess how long it took to create this feeling of complete hopelessness? The journey across the Atlantic took weeks, and for many brides, this time became a period of painful farewell to their past lives. They stood on the decks of huge steamships, watching their native shores disappear over the horizon, realizing that they might never see them again. A foreign world awaited them, with unfamiliar rules and people who looked down on them, despite their millions. The first-class cabins were full of luxury, but even that could not drown out the anxiety that had settled in their hearts. Many of these girls carried trunks filled not only with dresses, but also with books, letters, and cherished trinkets. These things were the last threads connecting them to home, to the place where they were loved for who they were, not for their money. They sorted through their treasures as they sat in their cabins, trying to imagine what their lives would be like in distant Europe. The ocean, endless and cold, seemed to them a symbol of the gulf that now separated them from their families and friends. The storms that rocked the ship echoed the storm of emotions raging inside each of them. Fear of the unknown future mingled with the hope that perhaps everything would not turn out so badly. Arrival at a European port was their first encounter with reality, which often proved harsher than any expectations. The gray fog, dampness, and reserve of those who greeted them contrasted sharply with the bright sun and openness of America. The grooms who met them at the pier often looked prim and aloof, nothing like the heroes of novels. The first meetings with their future new relatives took place in an atmosphere of tense politeness and hidden arrogance. European aristocrats regarded American women as exotic creatures who had brought gold to save their roofs. Their eyes revealed their contempt for new money, which they did not even try to hide. The girls immediately sensed that they were not welcomed here as family members, but were accepted as an inevitable evil. They were made to understand that their manners, their speech, and their habits were too crude for refined society. Every word spoken out of place was met with condescending smiles or icy silence. But the most frightening discovery awaited them ahead, when the wedding celebrations ended and everyday life began. Are you ready to find out how the living conditions in ancient castles broke the will of American women accustomed to comfort? The hidden truth that everyone kept quiet about was that the Duchess's life was far from comfortable. American heiresses, who had grown up in homes with central heating and hot water, found themselves in medieval conditions. The majestic castles their husbands were so proud of turned out to be icy crypts with wind blowing through the corridors. In winter, the temperature in the bedrooms dropped so low that the water in the wash basins turned to ice overnight. The women had to sleep under the weight of many woolen blankets, but even that did not save them from the penetrating dampness. Bathrooms, which American women were accustomed to, were often completely absent in English estates or were a rare luxury. The morning toilet became a test of endurance when the maids brought only small basins of quickly cooling water. The thought of a hot bath seemed like an unattainable dream that had to be forgotten for many months. The huge fireplaces in the halls looked impressive, but only provided warmth to those standing directly next to the fire. As soon as you took a couple of steps away, the cold enveloped your body again, penetrating through layers of clothing. Drafts were a constant companion in life, forcing people to wrap themselves in shawls even during dinner parties. The lack of electricity in the old estates meant that when the sun went down, life was plunged into semi-darkness. The dim light of candles and kerosene lamps cast long shadows that frightened and intensified the feeling of loneliness. It was difficult to read or do needlework, and the evenings dragged on endlessly in the gloomy silence. Antique furniture, although beautiful, was often uncomfortable and hard, completely unsuitable for relaxation. Four-poster beds, in which generations of ancestors had died, seemed not like beds of love, but monuments to the past. Dusty tapestries on the walls accumulated the smells of centuries, creating a heavy, stifling atmosphere. The sanitary conditions in some castles were shocking to women accustomed to modern hygiene. Ancient sewage systems, if they existed at all, often broke down or worked poorly, filling the house with unpleasant odors. This caused American women not only physical disgust, but also a feeling of deep humiliation. They had to spend huge sums of their dowry to modernize these stone boxes in some way. But any attempts to introduce comfort were often met with resistance from husbands and relatives who considered it a whim. "We have lived like this for centuries," they said, looking with contempt at their wives' attempts to install running water. The loneliness in these huge spaces was particularly acute when the echo of footsteps echoed through the empty galleries. The women wandered through the halls, trying to find at least one warm corner, but everywhere they were met only by the coldness of stone. They felt like prisoners, locked in the scenery of a historical drama where they were assigned the role of silent extras. Are you ready for the shocking truth about what went on behind the closed doors of family living rooms? American daughters-in-law in British high society were often met with a wall of icy alienation and snobbery. Their husbands' relatives, especially mothers-in-law and sisters-in-law, saw them as nothing more than vulgar upstarts with bags of money. They never missed an opportunity to emphasize the difference in their backgrounds, making snide remarks about their manners, accents, or taste in clothing. Any attempt by a young wife to show friendliness was met with a polite but impenetrable wall of indifference. Family dinners were often filled with heavy silence when the American woman tried to join in the conversation. They made it clear to her that no one was interested in her opinion and that her knowledge and experience were completely useless here. She was a stranger who had invaded their inner sanctum, and they were not going to forgive her for that, even though they were benefiting from her money. Husbands in such situations rarely defended their wives, preferring not to quarrel with their mothers or sisters. They often shared this dismissive attitude themselves, considering the marriage a necessary sacrifice for the sake of saving the estate. The woman found herself completely isolated, surrounded by hostility in her own home. She was required to adhere strictly to countless rules of etiquette that seemed meaningless and outdated to her. Any mistake, even the smallest, became a topic of discussion and condemnation within the family. She was constantly compared to local aristocrats, and the comparison was always to her disadvantage. The attitude towards money was particularly painful. They spent it with pleasure, but despised its source. Relatives did not hesitate to demand payment of their bills, but at the same time wrinkled their noses when talking about commerce and business. The American woman felt like a living wallet from which money was drawn without even a thank you. She was forbidden to change the rules of the house, even if they were clearly absurd or inconvenient. Traditions, no matter how absurd, were placed above common sense and comfort. She had to adapt to a way of life that had been formed over centuries, breaking herself and her habits. Life turned into an endless series of humiliations disguised as social propriety. Do you think it is fair to judge a person only by their background, ignoring their personal qualities? In the next chapter, you will learn how these women tried to fill the void in their days. The days in the huge estates dragged on slowly and monotonously, merging into an endless gray ribbon. Women who were used to an active life in New York had no right to real activity here. Their lot was limited to managing the household, choosing the menu, and writing endless letters. But even in this, they were restricted by strict rules and control from the housekeeper or mother-in-law. The morning began with a long dressing routine, which was in itself a tedious procedure involving the maids. This was followed by breakfast, often alone or in the dead silence of their husband's presence. There was nothing to discuss at the table. They had no common interests, no common friends, and no common plans. The rest of the day was filled with visits that were more of a duty than entertainment. They had to travel to neighboring estates, drink tea, and engage in empty conversation about the weather and hunting. These social rituals lacked sincerity. They resembled a theatrical performance with poorly rehearsed roles. Walks in the park were the only opportunity to be alone and breathe fresh air. Women wandered along perfectly manicured paths, looking at the gray skies and remembering sunny America. The surrounding nature was beautiful, but alien and orderly, like their whole life. Evenings were spent in the living room embroidering or reading books that brought no comfort. Husbands often went to their clubs or went about their business, leaving their wives to their own devices. The silence in the house was so thick that it seemed you could cut it with a knife. Attempts to engage in charity or something useful were often met with incomprehension. Aristocratic society did not welcome women's active involvement, considering it bad form. Their role was to be a beautiful addition to the interior and status of their husbands. Organizing balls and receptions was the only event that brought any excitement. Women spent weeks preparing, choosing flowers, music, and refreshments. But even in these moments, they felt more like administrators than hosts of the celebration. What if everything you were taught about women's rights in the past is outdated compared to the reality of these marriages? The legal status of women in marriage at that time was depressing. They effectively became the property of their husbands. All her wealth, all the huge dowry that her fathers had listed, came under the complete control of her spouse. She could not dispose of a single cent of this money without his permission, even for personal needs. This put her in a humiliating position of dependence, as she had to ask for money from the person who was living off her. The laws of the time were written by men and for men, reliably protecting their interests. Women had no say in important family matters, including the education and upbringing of children. She was merely a tool for passing on inheritance, but not a full partner. Divorce in those days was virtually impossible and meant social death for a woman. Even if her husband was cruel, unfaithful, or gambled away his fortune, society expected the wife to be submissive. Leaving her husband meant losing access to her children and becoming an outcast in high society. Many women tried to fight for their rights within the family, using cunning and diplomacy. They learned to manipulate their husbands in order to achieve at least some concessions or freedom of action. But it was an exhausting guerrilla war that rarely led to real victory. Some American women began consulting with lawyers, trying to find loopholes in marriage contracts. This provoked the fury of their husbands and relatives, who considered such actions treasonous. The struggle for financial independence became a battlefield where no prisoners were taken. Cases of physical or psychological abuse were not uncommon, but they were carefully hidden behind the walls of mansions. There was no one to complain to. The police and the courts always sided with the titled spouse. Women found themselves trapped with no legal way out. Their struggle was invisible to the world, but it required tremendous courage and fortitude. Do you think women should have complete financial independence in marriage? In the next chapter, we will learn the story of one particular woman who became a symbol of this era. The story of Consuelo Vanderbilt became the most vivid and sad example of a marriage of convenience of that era. She was incredibly beautiful, rich, and in love with another man, but her mother, Alva, had plans for her daughter. Alva dreamed of seeing Consuelo become a duchess, and no amount of tears or pleas from her daughter could stop her. The girl was literally locked in her room and threatened with the death of her lover if she did not agree to marry the Duke of Marlborough. On her wedding day, Consuelo cried so hard that her face swelled up, and the makeup artist had to work hard to hide it. She walked down the aisle as if to the scaffold, arriving late, which caused the guests to whisper. Her groom, the Duke of Marlborough, also had no feelings for her. He only needed her money to save the family castle at Blenheim. This union was made in the heavens of hell. Two complete strangers were bound by marriage for the sake of ambition and bricks. Consuelo found herself in a huge, cold palace where everything reminded her of her sacrifice. The Duke was cold, critical, and openly despised his young wife as soon as he gained access to her dowry. At dinner, she had to sit at the head of a table so long that her husband seemed like a tiny dot at the other end. Conversations were formal, and the atmosphere was unbearably oppressive. Consuelo wrote in her diaries that she felt not like a hostess, but like an expensive ornament that had been bought and placed on a shelf. Her mother-in-law, the widowed duchess, immediately told her, "Your main task is to give birth to a son, and then another one, for good measure." These words sounded like a sentence, reducing the young woman's entire life to a biological function. Consuelo fulfilled her duty by giving birth to 2 sons, but this did not bring her happiness. Her money went to the restoration of Blenheim, which literally blossomed thanks to the millions of the Vanderbilts. She saw her fortune turn into repaired roofs, new gardens, and luxurious interiors. But she herself withered away in these magnificent surroundings, deprived of love and warmth. Despite all her suffering, Consuelo found the strength to engage in charity work, helping the poor and the sick. This became her outlet, a way to feel needed and human. Ordinary people loved her for her kindness, while the aristocracy saw her only as a wallet. Not all stories ended in tears. Some women found the strength to change the rules of the game. Jenny Jerome, who became Lady Randolph Churchill, was one of the first dollar princesses and perhaps the most prominent. She possessed not only beauty and money, but also a sharp mind, charisma, and incredible energy. Her marriage was also one of convenience, but Jenny decided that she would not simply be her husband's shadow. She plunged headlong into English political life, becoming an indispensable assistant to Lord Randolph. Jenny wrote speeches, organized receptions, and used her influence to advance her husband's career. Her American assertiveness and ability to communicate with people shocked the prim English, but earned her respect. Jenny did not hide in the cold rooms of castles. She shone in high society, dictating fashion and style. She was the life of the party, always surrounded by the most influential people of the time. Her charm was her weapon, and she wielded it perfectly, opening any door. However, behind this glamour lay personal drama. Her husband was ill and distant, and her ambitions often came up against a glass ceiling. But she transferred all her unspent love and energy to her sons, especially the eldest, Winston. Jenny became not just a mother to him, but a mentor, friend, and key political ally. She used all her connections to help Winston Churchill launch a career that would change the world. Without her support, her money, and her connections, the history of the 20th century might have taken a different course. Jenny believed in his genius even when others doubted him. She allowed herself liberties that were unthinkable for other women. She had lovers, including the Prince of Wales. Society condemned her behind her back, but continued to smile to her face because it was dangerous to quarrel with her. Jenny lived as she saw fit, breaking stereotypes about the submissive wife. World War I was the watershed that forever changed the world of aristocracy and marriage deals. The old order collapsed under artillery fire, and with it, strict social norms became a thing of the past. Many of the castles for which American brides had been sacrificed were turned into hospitals or destroyed. Death made everyone equal. Heirs to titles died in the trenches alongside farmers' sons. After the war, the economic situation in Europe changed dramatically, and maintaining huge estates became an even more unbearable burden. Inheritance and land taxes rose, forcing aristocrats to sell their properties or open them to the public. The money of American wives, which had previously saved the day, was now rapidly melting away in the new economic realities. The women themselves, having survived the horrors of war and the loss of loved ones, no longer wanted to put up with their powerless position. They saw that the world could be different and felt their strength and ability to survive. Many of them returned to America, taking their children and what remained of their fortunes with them, preferring freedom to title. Society also changed. The old aristocracy was replaced by a new elite that valued personal achievement rather than pedigree. Titles ceased to be an absolute guarantee of status and respect, and marriages of convenience began to seem archaic. The girls of the new generation wanted to marry for love, not at their parents' behest. Newspapers stopped glorifying unions of dollars and coats of arms and began to write about women's rights and social change. The romantic aura surrounding suffering duchesses dissipated, revealing the ugly truth about the commercial nature of these marriages. People began to understand that happiness is not measured by the number of rooms in a castle or the antiquity of a family. Of course, marriages between the rich and the noble did not disappear completely, but they ceased to be so widespread and compulsory. Now women had a choice, and they increasingly chose themselves rather than the interests of their families. The era of dollar princesses was becoming a thing of the past, leaving behind beautiful legends and sad fates. Many former heiresses, widowed or divorced, lived out their lives in more modest but comfortable homes. They remembered their youth without nostalgia, rejoicing that their daughters and granddaughters would not have to go through the same hell. They witnessed the end of the world that had sold them. What remains of those times, apart from beautiful portraits in museums and lines in history textbooks? The legacy of the dollar princesses is restored castles that today attract thousands of tourists. Every stone in Blenheim or other estates was essentially paid for with the loneliness and tears of American girls. We admire the architecture and interiors, often forgetting the human price that was paid for them. The descendants of these marriages, including Winston Churchill, combined the traditions of old Europe with the energy of the New World. This new blood infused into the veins of the dying aristocracy helped many families survive and adapt. But many children who grew up in an atmosphere of coldness and alienation carried the psychological trauma of their mothers. The stories of these women became a lesson for future generations, a reminder that happiness cannot be bought or exchanged for a title. They taught us to value freedom of choice and the right to control our own destiny. Their diaries and letters are a quiet voice of protest that echoes through the centuries, calling on us to be honest with ourselves. Today we look at their dresses and jewelry in exhibitions, imagining how heavy it must have been to carry this burden of gold and expectations. We see in their eyes and photographs not only sparkle, but also a deep sadness that cannot be hidden. They were pioneers of globalization, but became victims of their family's social ambitions. Many of them never found peace, remaining eternal wanderers between two continents, never feeling at home anywhere. Their graves are scattered on both sides of the Atlantic, like symbols of their broken lives. But the memory of them lives on, and it makes us think about our own values. We may condemn their parents for their cruelty, but we must also remember the strength of spirit of these women. They survived in a foreign environment, maintained their dignity, and tried to make the world around them a little better. Their charity work and their contributions to art and politics are also part of their legacy. We have touched on one of the most dramatic pages of history, hidden behind the glitter of diamonds and the rustle of ball gowns. The fates of American heiresses show us how cruel society can be when money and titles are placed above human happiness. Their lives in cold castles were full of invisible struggles, tears, and quiet courage, which are rarely written about in official chronicles. What do you think about the fate of these women? Were they victims of circumstance, or did they get what their families wanted for them? Suggest topics for future videos in the comments section. What other hidden dramas of history would you like to learn about? And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new exciting journeys into the past.